Welcome to The Real Story. I'm your host, Riley Lewis, and thank you for joining us. Today's top story brings us to the Butler report. On Sunday, the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs released its final report about the security failures that led to the assassination attempt on President Trump just over 1 year ago in Butler, Pennsylvania. And the key takeaway of it is very clear, that the assassination attempt was preventable. The whole thing could have been stopped, but sadly and tragically, it wasn't. Instead, Thomas Matthew Crooks, the 20-year-old would-be assassin who was killed by counter-snipers, managed to evade the country's top protective agency for roughly 45 minutes and managed to fire 8 shots, injuring 3 people, including President Trump. He also killed a retired fire chief named Corey Comparatori, despite the fact that he was reported to the Secret Service for suspicious activity and for having a rangefinder at least 25 minutes before the attack. And yet, despite it all, no one from the Secret Service has been fired for it. Yes, 6 agents have faced disciplinary action as a consequence of their action or inaction. And then Director Kimberly Cheadle resigned shortly after the incident happened. But no one has lost their job for the glaring security failures that took place. And it leaves one with a simple question. Why not? Why have the people who endangered Trump's life been protected? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But speaking of, here are the details about this report. So the committee conducted 17 transcribed interviews with Secret Service personnel and reviewed more than 75,000 pages of documents produced by local, state, and federal law enforcement entities to compile it. And it also expanded upon a previous report that was released in September of 2024. It also includes 8 critical points. And the bottom line is that it confirms that the assassination attempt was the result of several security failures that never should have happened in the first place. Additionally, it found that then Director Kimberly Cheadle lied to Congress during her testimony shortly after the attempt. In fact, the report found that she lied about the agency having denied multiple requests for extra security resources at that rally in Butler, but she also wasn't fired for it. Instead, she resigned. Yes, in disgrace, but still, that's not good enough. And while the accuracy of her statements under oath have been disputed by some, Senator Rand Paul stood by it during an interview on Face the Nation on Sunday.
She did not tell the truth. She said that there were no assets that were requested in advance. We found at least 4 occasions, actually maybe 5 occasions, where requests were made. The primary request that was made by both Trump's Secret Service detail as well as his campaign was for counter-snipers. Counter-snipers were denied until Butler. So thank God on that day in Butler County, Pennsylvania, that was the first time he was allowed counter-snipers. If he had not had counter-snipers, that assassin would have popped up again. He did pop up again to continue firing, and that's when he was taken out. But thank God we had the counter-snipers there. But why were they denied for months and months? When they finally did ask for them, they mysteriously, magically appeared. They found them where they needed. They just weren't trying hard enough. So it was a cascade of errors. It was just one error after another.
Wow, really? Why no one from the agency has been fired for the situation remains a complete mystery to me. But what also remains a mystery is the gunman's motive. Now, some people have claimed that his motivation was ideological or political. However, these claims haven't been verified. Moreover, the FBI has pointed to several other possible motives, like personal grievances and even mental health issues, but nothing is really clear as of right now. It's all speculation. His real motive, whatever it was, might not ever be known at this point, and Senator Paul also spoke to that point during that same interview on Sunday.
I think we aren't going to know the motive, and I take that at face value. I know a lot of times when we don't get something and we suspect something, we think government's lying to us. And look, I have my doubts about government on many levels, but I think on this level they've tried their best, and I don't think there's a secret answer that they're not revealing to us. I think they just don't know. What we do know is the failures in security, and that the Corey Comparatari could have possibly been saved by having better security that day. And this boy was seen 4 hours before the shooting. He was seen again 45 minutes before. 3 minutes before the shooting, the crowd is chanting, "Man on a roof, man on a roof." 45 seconds to go as he's assembling his gun. 45 seconds is a long time.
Yeah.
Nobody told them to take the president off the stage. Inexcusable, terrible security, but whoever's in charge should have been fired and really should never be in charge of this type of, or have this type of responsibility again.
Well, there it is. And despite it all, there's one question that remains unanswered to this day. Was Thomas Matthew Crooks really a lone wolf? Now, the official narrative seems to be that he acted entirely alone, on his own accord, but one can't help but wonder if that's really true. Neither the FBI nor the Secret Service has found evidence that he worked with someone else, and maybe he really did act alone. But in either case, the bottom line is that the assassination attempt itself was preventable. It never should have happened, and it can never happen ever again. And without some real accountability and real justice for it, the lesson will never be learned. Here with reaction is Steve Abramowicz, the host of the Heartland Journal podcast. Steve, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, a former president and major party candidate gets shot in the face. An American citizen gets killed. And to this day, more than a year later, we still have unanswered questions and a lack of accountability. What do you make about that?
Well, I mean, there's Trump, the Superman, says he doesn't like to think about it much, and American spirit triumphs over forces of evil. And we saw that when he went back to the same spot and gave the speech where he started it. Now, where was I? I mean, that was classic Trump. Trump said this last Saturday, he's satisfied with the report, but we do have to make sure it never happens again. I mean, so we have to actually, 2 reports to look through. Democrat John Fetterman saying on X, we must condemn political violence in any form and turn down the temperature. Sadly, his party is not listening to that. So we have Rand Paul's HHS report that you quoted from, and we have Senator Chuck Grassley's GAO report. Both are damning. That basically the Secret Service, stunning failures, preventable failures. We can't have that and have a president go out and meet the people.
No, we certainly can't. I'm glad you mentioned John Fetterman, actually. Special shout out to him because he did post on X about that. I saw over the weekend condemning what we saw, saying over 1 year ago in Pennsylvania, we saw a stark reminder of the awfulness of political violence. I'm really, really happy he said that. What happened in Butler was tragic. Doesn't matter who it was, President Trump, Joe Biden, it doesn't matter. That act of violence is unacceptable. So I don't agree with him about much, but I do agree with him there. So I'm glad that you brought that up because that is a really, really important message to get out there. And it's nice to hear even Democrats as well as many Republicans coming out and condemning it. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that he said that.
And this is the era of Doge, where 1,500 State Department people are leaving. And obviously, as you pointed out, nobody has been held responsible. The suspensions are 10 to 42 days, including the Secret Service's Pittsburgh field office head. So if you don't give these people punishment like firings or losing their pensions, why wouldn't it happen again? So if they want to turn down the political violence heat, well, look at what just happened in Los Angeles. Look at what's happening with the ICE agents being attacked.
Sure.
They're not doing exactly that. And we need to see some accountability, which means Chuck Grassley has to not do a report, but actually put some people in the court.
Okay. I want to ask you now about Thomas Matthew Crooks. And this next question, it does call for some speculation, so I want to preface it with that. However, do you personally believe that he acted as a lone wolf, or do you think it's possible that maybe he acted with others?
I think anything's possible. This is the era of the JFK revelations, and obviously the auto pen, and John Brennan and the FBI Comey director, former director, being brought criminal charges. So anything is possible. But do I think he could have acted alone? Sure. Do I think he did? It just doesn't seem plausible. I mean, even the snipers that were on the roof were shooting in a different direction than killing him on the roof that he was supposedly there. And why was the FBI there within minutes, hosing it all down? That's not what they're supposed to do. That's DNA evidence. So the whole thing just, more questions than answers. That's what I do for a living on my show, is ask questions. And unfortunately, instead of answering the questions, we have 1,000 spawns of more questions on that day. And this report, both reports, don't really clarify that. It'll remain a mystery because they don't want to tell us. If they wanted to tell us, they'd tell us. They don't want to tell us.
That's a really good point. It's sad to think about that, but I think you're right about that, Steve. But that does bring me to another question. I was reading through this report. If people want to find it, it's online. It's 31 pages long, so pretty easy to get through. There's one part of it, though, that really stuck out to me, so I want to ask you about it. It said that prior to July 13th of 2024, there was no formal process for requesting and or denying access to more security resources at a rally like the one we saw in Butler, Pennsylvania. How could it be possible that the nation's top protective agency doesn't have a standard operating procedure for asking for more security resources at an extremely high-profile event that features a former president and major party candidate? How could that possibly be, Steve?
It's not possible. This is the premier law enforcement agency. They are elite. Secret Service, in the Chuck Grassley report, the GAO report again, received threat intel 10 days before Butler rally, and it exposed major gaps in internal policies and procedures, contributed to massive security breakdown. That doesn't happen on accident. They must have had plenty of meetings, plenty of observations, plenty of mapping, all the things that go along with it. Why wasn't there a drone in the air? Why didn't they have the local PD involved? It just makes no sense. And so again, back to Trump's bravery to go back and stand at the exact same spot, no PTSD, and deliver that speech with his Trumpian fare just shows that, he is blessed by God to have missed that bullet by millimeters, and we're lucky to have him. And maybe we're yet to see what the good Lord has in store for him and our country to be in office, but they certainly could have made the whole thing avoidable. And like you said, he was walking around for 4 hours, observed by everybody. They were yelling and screaming, someone's on the roof, because they were there because they love Trump. They don't want to see anything bad happen to him. But Secret Service decided to look the other way. That is going to always be a mystery as to how could they possibly have let it happen. And for one person to have been fired, that's okay. But I think there's actually more to that. They need to do a roll up from the bottom guy up to the security guard at parking all the way up to the top to figure out, was this actually intended?
It's like, at this point, it's a fair question. I think just about anything is on the table. Which brings me, though, to my last point with you, Steve. Let's talk about how we got here in this country, to this place where political violence is gradually becoming the norm. That brings us to the narrative that we get from the legacy media. I'm not saying they're to blame for this, but for the better part of a decade leading up to that fateful moment, they said horrible things about him. They smeared him, calling him things like a white supremacist, a racist, a xenophobe, a misogynist. I think that vile rhetoric set the stage for the violence that we saw that day. And I'm wondering, have Democrats, in your opinion, learned their lesson about rhetoric and the power of it? Because I really think that could be one of the factors here that might have motivated Thomas Matthew Crooks.
I think that's exactly right. I think what happened was you had the Bernie Sanders bro who went out and shot up the Republican softball game not that many years prior.
Yes.
And he was given all the breathing room in the world. And again, they didn't tell us why. Same thing with the Las Vegas shooter who shot up a country music concert with Jason Aldean down in the square. They never really told us the motives and all the mysteries behind it. So all we're left to think is that on the far left, the rhetoric of violence and put them in their sights and punch a Nazi in the face led to somebody acting out the actual fantasy that isn't Call of Duty, but real life. And this was supposed to have been done away with, back when they got really mad about Sarah Palin having a target on her, or what's the senator from Arizona's name who's married to the gal who was shot in the head and fortunately survived.
Yes.
But the exact same thing, where political rhetoric that was violent led to violent extremists taking action. Not to mention this is how World War I kicked off. But the point is that in America, they are taking it to a level of rhetoric that is actually translating into the streets, and they've been doing this for quite a while. It's actually a 25, if not 30-year ramp up to where they could feel emboldened to take a shot at a president because he's a Republican. They don't agree with his politics. How awful is that? Yeah,
it's disgusting, and it really doesn't matter what your party is, what your ideology is. this kind of violence has to be unacceptable, and that's why I think we cannot let go of this story. I want more pressure on the Secret Service. We need full transparency, full accountability. There is zero margin for error when you are the nation's top protective agency. So it doesn't matter who it is just unacceptable to me, and I think we all as Americans deserve better, and I think that we should expect better from them.
You're right, especially when we had BLM and Antifa leading up to January 6th and all of that violent rhetoric and insurgents and insurrection comments. If you had a chance to kill Hitler before he became, rise to power, wouldn't you take it? That's sort of their argument on the left is like, well, yes, he's that bad. Somebody do something. And my goodness, what happened?
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and it speaks to this kind of delusion and psychosis that we're seeing from them, but we're out of time for this segment, so I want to say, Steve, thank you for stopping by and giving us your thoughts about it.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, it's not just some people in the MAGA world that want the Epstein files to be released in full, but now Democrats do too. But what's their underlying motive, really? More details about that after the break.